Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and honoured guests. Just before I go on to talk about cross-subsidy in the Indian electricity market, a couple of words about ENGIE. We're a global electricity and gas company based in France, present in 70 countries worldwide. Here in India, we're into the renewable energy business, generating electricity with solar and wind, with plans to build a much bigger business here too. Just to correct something on the program, actually it's not a presentation, there are no slides. Sadly, I don't have any funny photographs of President Trump, so I've been upstaged by Mr. David Leckie. But never mind, I do have an opinion on something that's very important, I think, here in India, and that is the cross-subsidy in the electricity market. In case there are those here who don't know, in fact, there is a large swathe of the population who receive electricity supply at their homes at a below-cost subsidized rate, and that's paid for by the tariffs to industrial and commercial customers, which is well above cost. And that, on the surface, is quite a good social program. There's a lot of rural poor with very little money receiving a subsidized electricity supply. But in fact, this creates many problems. So let's take a look at a few. The first is that if you receive electricity, or any other product for that matter, at below its value, you don't value it yourself properly, so you would use it irrationally, as in using more than necessary. That's just fundamental economics. It's not complicated, but it is a fact. Secondly, it creates a perverse incentive for the distribution companies. It's well known in India that there are some 200 million people without electricity at all, no electricity supply in their homes. And the distribution companies know very well that every time they connect one more customer, actually they lose more money. So why would you connect a new customer just to lose money? I know that there's some kind of incentive from central government, but it's short term. In the long term, the discoms would lose more money. So the same perverse incentive makes discoms fight very hard to hold on to their high-paying industrial and commercial customers, whose cross-subsidy surcharges fund the subsidy to the rural customers. They have a thing called a cross-subsidy surcharge, whereby if an industrial customer leaves the discom and takes his supply from somewhere else, they have to pay a cross-subsidy surcharge to the discom in order to keep the cross-subsidy afloat. There are other less direct methods, and a good example of that is what's called the group captive scheme, which at its heart is a naked barrier to prevent high-paying customers going elsewhere to get a more economic supply. And that's not to mention the resources that all parties deploy in dreaming up these schemes and then litigating their unintended consequences through the courts. Thirdly, the high cost of electricity to industrial and commercial customers acts as a brake on economic development, pushing up costs to make Indian business less competitive and ultimately costing jobs. So finally, this cross-subsidy and the associated uneconomic tariffs are one of the key underlying reasons that the discoms are in poor financial health. There was a recent scheme called Uday to recapitalise discoms. There were schemes before that, and there will be schemes in the future again and again until the market fundamentals are fixed properly. Of course, we all know the real issue which prevents fixing this problem, and that is that the people on the receiving end of the cross-subsidy represent a significant voting bloc. Any politician who proposes to eliminate this cross-subsidy immediately commits political suicide. But it could be fixed. All we need to do is take a little bit of imagination and political willpower. And by way of example, I offer you, I think it's what Iran did, as a good example. They had a similar problem, a very large population, not used to paying the proper price for their electricity. What the government did was open a bank account for each affected family and pay into the bank account the equivalent of their cross-subsidy. At the same time, they raised the price of power to a commercial rate. So then the family was in a position of choice. They can keep the money and save the electricity, or they could spend the money on the electricity. So they could make a rational decision about their own electricity consumption. Surely, with the Aadhaar scheme and digital government, something similar could be done here. Thank you.